Maybe we'll start now. Okay, so nice to see you all back. Now, some of you were here for first part of this series. We decided to make it into a series of 3 because the first one seemed to beg for that. And there's a lot of interest in that. And I think this is a fundamentally important piece of what our school is about. And so I thought that's really good to round out the story further. So first, those of you who saw the first one of these recordings, webinar from January the 6th, I introduced myself more there and said a few more things. I'm Duncan Scribner. Those of you who haven't been here before, I've been here in Colorado for 45 years or so, having come here from Boston for school. I had a biosciences career for several years and then transitioned to the work I'm doing now, which I've done since the early 80s. I started in the school in the early 70s or mid 70s. So last time we worked with truth. This was Truth Compass 1, and I talked mostly about truth and an inner sense of how to know when we're on track and when we're not. But before we go into it further, I want us to sit for a few minutes. We're just going to take maybe, I don't know, 5 or a few minutes to just settle, meditate. It's part of what we do in each meeting in our school is sit for a little bit at the beginning of each meeting. And part of that is to just settle, sort of, gather ourselves for what we're going to do. But also, obviously, I think we all know that meditation is about developing presence. And all that we do, particularly here in this context, working with truth, is an aspect, quality of presence. It's something we are in touch with from a much deeper place inside us than our usual running around in the world self. So we make a distinction between those, obviously, and we want to settle, align ourselves a little more with that presence, because what we're doing is developing that and learning more about it in its various qualities. So we'll just sit now for a few minutes, just to quiet, let yourself just be aware of your breath. You feel the breath in the belly, just coming in and going out. If you have a practice of your own, then you do that one. And then I'll ring a bell and we'll just come back and I'll start talking about what we're going to address today. Okay, so actually ring the bell at the beginning here too. Okay. So last time we addressed and tried to bring out experientially for everyone a sense of, a feeling of this orienting directionality that our soul has, that recognizes the truth, that can recognize when we're on track and recognizes when we're off track. When, you know, might be when you say something, when we say something we feel is off in some way, not exactly right, you feel it, you can feel it. So it's not exactly some spiritual sense of, okay, this is true north, and I know where true north is, and you could think of it that way. People do talk about it that way. But what I'm after with teaching in this school is a felt sense, an experiential sense. All that we do, all that we try to learn about here has got to be experiential. You have to know it, you have to feel it. You have to be able to use it. In order to be able to use it, you have to know it, feel it. It can't just be ideas. Because we use this faculty for our exploration, for understanding, for our own personal development. And our personal development, of course, has to involve being able to experientially know where we are and where we're going, and not where we're going, but the direction that seems to be a more true direction. And I don't think anybody will argue that the world generally isn't all that truthful. Most of us in our, if we just sort of look at the world, we see all kinds of stuff going on that based in strange ideas, And oddly, the various spiritual traditions fighting with each other and having their view of what the truth is and what's real and who should be what, and all that business, to the point that we're killing each other. So we don't have to go far to see that, but we also don't have to go far to see in ourselves and to kind of recognize our own sense of where we get off track and when we go in the direction that's, not the best for us. But not only that, doesn't help us to be more free, because last time we also discussed how the sense, the felt sense of when we are more aligned with the truth, whether it's just admitting some piece of our own part in some conflictual situation and finally recognizing, yep, okay, I see that. I was really full of it there. Some kind of relaxation happens. And it's not just some kind, a really important sense of feeling more, we could say, more on the ground, more truthful, more relaxed, more free, maybe. The best way to say it, And you know how that freedom can feel when you go through a little process like that. So today I thought we'd bring up another couple of ways of looking at things, different expressions, different frameworks in which to articulate the situation. I imagine most of us have heard the phrase or the question, what is it to be in the world but not of it? Right? In the world but not of it. Where does that come from? So and so, of course, as usual, I like to Google things and just see what's been said about it. So I thought that one, before I even Googled it, I thought, oh, that's a Sufi thing. That's probably from Rumi or one of those guys back there. So I went and Googled that last night, and I discovered that almost many spiritual traditions claim that. And so I was a little surprised. So I don't know who said it first, but I realized, oh, well, that's interesting. All of the various traditions, the Christian, the Islamic, most of them like that phrase. And then, of course, when I realized that, I thought, well, of course, because it's a really good articulation of the human condition situation. And I think all spiritual traditions work with that. They're all interested in that. So, who did it, who started it, doesn't really matter. We're interested to know, how does that help us if we think about it? So in the world part of it, of course, all of us are in the world. We're here, we're alive, we're in the world. But that's not exactly what is meant by it. I think the way I feel it is, we each, if we're, awake enough to really understanding the importance of really being here, we would say that we want to be here as fully as we can be. We want to show up. We want to have meaningful interaction. What does that mean other than we want our interactions to be meaningful, truthful, real, authentic, not deceit, not deceptive, right? And so if we really want to be in the world, we want to be in the world and have meaningful, happy, free interactions. Everybody wants that. We want that because it's our nature, really, to do that and to be that. Why else would we be here? We're not here to suffer and have difficulties. And we have all of that, of course. But this is, of course, a big part of what it is that we're trying to understand in our school and in any spiritual school. They're all about that. As I said, in the world, but not of it. They all have their ways of understanding, what the problem is. And probably most of them would say that self-deception is a part of the second part of the phrase, of the world. So we're going to be in the world, but not of it. Where being of it means sort of being the usual personality-driven, ego-driven, self-perpetuating driven ways of being in the world that most people are. And we can't help but be. It's not like people are wantonly self-deceptive for no good reason. We all have good intentions, and those good intentions, however, can go out the window for various reasons, which we'll get to. So being of the world, as I said, the way of the ego, the way of the false personality, we call it, some people call it that. The off part, that part that our truth compass recognizes when we're awake to it, it recognizes we're doing something that's off. And then there's the suffering. And that world of, it's often also in other spiritual traditions thought of and called the world of lies, right? So we don't want to be of the world of lies, which is the world of usual humanity, right? So I realized, okay, I'm on the World Wide Web looking up, what does it mean, in the world but not of it? And so we are articulating the world of lies. We could also call the World Wide Web of self-deception, right? We have the World Wide Web where we can find all kinds of truth on Google and so on. It's wonderful. But now we're coining a new phrase, the World Wide Web of self-deception, because everybody is doing that. Egos basically lie. Personalities bend the truth. Personalities forget about the truth. We might know the truth, but we all tend to collude somehow in not upholding it. And that's why, here we are, a bunch of people interested in, okay, this truth compass, what is that? Because we know it's needed. We know that, in our do-do-de-do walking around self, there's lots of self-deception happening, right? Now, one of my friends said, oh, you shouldn't call it lying, you're going to talk about lying to people? No, people are going to feel offended by that. And I'm saying, well, I think we should just be direct. To call it self-deception is true. To call it lying is more putting it like, okay, we all need to look at that and see, well, how do I lie to myself? How do I deceive myself? I don't want to sugarcoat it, because I think that the fact of lying and self-deception and not orienting to truth, forgetting about the truth, going in little directions, it's like one little untruth leads to another little untruth, and there are movies about it, and all kind of comedy that people get into, and they bend the truth and so on. So there's all of that. But in terms of us, for each of us, in terms of our moment-to-moment experience in life, it'd be really important for us to not just address how we can perceive the truth, but to actually look directly at some of the ways we lie, bend the truth, It's important. Another way to look at it, of course, we're talking about our inner life, not just our worldly ways we bend the truth, but how does that impact our inner life and our sense of presence, let's say. If we're working to develop that sense of, that inner sense of who am I, or what am I really? Our own possible inner sense of aliveness, settledness, like our own private spaces of how we feel ourselves and know ourselves, and do we like ourselves or reject ourselves, all the various things that go on inside of us. This orientation to truth is really important there, and most impactful really for how we experience ourselves. So we're not looking for just technologies for how to detect truth and falsehood. We don't want to forget that this biggest impact really is how we experience ourselves, our own presence, our own inner sense of self. And our inner sense of self, to a large extent, just because we've been conditioned in this world through this World Wide Web of self-deception, meaning everybody's doing it. We're not alone in it, as we'll see. It defines some of the ways that we all do it. Because we're embedded in that web, it's not so easy to step out of it. But it's possible to step out of it. In fact, it's quite possible to step out of it if we understand the situation a little more. And I think that's what all the traditions are talking about when they claim the phrase "in the world but not of it," is the possibility to step out and become, might be, some might say a better citizen, some might see a better servant of God, Some might say a better sense of self. Some might say greater freedom. And as we discussed in the last time we were together for this first webinar in January, as we discussed, we said that if you look at it this way, then you see that the truth really is our best friend. It is one's best friend. Go further to say, that it's the only thing we could really depend upon. Just think about it. Think about all your friends. Sometimes your friends aren't always completely dependable, because everybody's caught in this World Wide Web of self-deception. Sometimes your friends will do something on or off, and it's not like they're not your friend because they do it, but if you think of it this way, then the truth and your own inner sense of truth, that you can always depend on. Always. Truth is the truth. The truth is the right direction. It's not just an idea. And as we see, the more we embrace it, the more we find it, the more it's working for us, the more free we are. As simple as that. So it helps our life in terms of our interactive situations, our relationships, and so on, but also will serve to help us with those deeper questions, those deeper, more, philosophical or existential questions. What am I? Who am I? All the traditions ask, which I assume all of us here are interested in. So what kind of ways do we lie? And I'll just talk about a few that are obvious that probably many of us already know about. If you just think about how we deal with our inner state, our emotional states, I mean, it's well known, all the various ways that we aren't true and authentic in dealing with what we feel, what our feelings are, for instance. It's a very easy thing to see. So we rationalize, for instance. We'll say, well, yeah, I'm really, really, really angry and unhappy in this situation, but I'm not really going to say much about it because it's not good to be angry. People don't like anger. Or I have this tremendous sadness because my friend did this or said that or whatever, but we tend to hold on to it and say, well, people are uncomfortable with sadness. Well, I'm uncomfortable with sadness. Maybe I'm uncomfortable with sadness because I think other people are not going to understand it or not respond to it or push it aside. And of course, that then brings some understanding about maybe how our own, that emotion, that sadness in our life was dealt with, in our formative years, was sadness okay? If you were sad, did somebody pick you up and hold you and talk to you and try to find out, explore with you what's happening? Not everybody had that experience. So we have conflicts around that emotion or around anger. But if we're truthful in a particular situation, we might say to somebody, that's not working for me. This makes me feel such and such a way, that you could do it in a good way that will help to solve the particular situation. But we might not because we're rationalizing. We're sort of sweeping that particular feeling under the rug, And that's a way that everybody lies, deceives themselves. Like it's hard to deal with emotions. And there's nobody I've met really as we start working here in our school that doesn't have something like that. We're just not comfortable with just being really open with our various emotional states. So that's rationalization. Other ways people deceive themselves is to, you might be feeling, again, it's around emotions, you might be feeling something in yourself, but you don't want to feel it. There's some kind of like, I don't want to feel that. And so you think other people around you are feeling that toward you. And, the psychologists know that as projection. You're feeling something, you don't want to feel that feeling, you just think the other person is feeling it. So you're feeling this anger all around you, but it's actually you, for instance. That's another one that, many people do. We might have difficulty dealing with other people's emotional state. And you notice I'm talking about relational situations now. Someone else might be having deep feelings about one thing or another. And again, we might try to protect them for those feelings, for instance. So somebody's feeling really, really hurt. Rather than talking with them about it and trying to help them understand it, helping them go into it a little more, even let them feel the feeling, whatever it's about, some people will just say, oh, don't worry about that. Things will be better. Let's go get lunch or something like that. So we're trying to protect people from feeling sort of like another way we tend to collude, because as an overall structure, our overall World Wide Web, we think difficult feelings are just something we don't want to deal with. Right? We might, if we make a mistake in a particular situation, for instance, is another example. You made a mistake, but you tend to sort of cover it up, not admit this mistake, and might happen in just small ways, the littlest ways. It's something, and we think of it as just sort of a small thing, right? It's like you make a mistake with, it could be anything, the grocery list, you forgot one thing or two things on the list, and you go home and your friend says, oh, you forgot those things. And you say, well, I was busy, or I was distracted by one thing, all of which might be fine. But what does that do to our, again, sort of inner atmosphere? When we do or say anything that's sort of a cover-up for the truth. You just take that, yeah, I forgot. Right? That has a very different inner feeling from deflecting it with, well, this lady said this and I got distracted and it was this and cans fell off the shelf or whatever it is. So covering your tracks, rationalizing, inside you, that you're no longer aligned. You've been kicked out of actual truth, and you'll feel it. You'll feel it in your inner atmosphere. So I hope this comes across, that what we're after here really is what is our inner experience and how that interfaces with our relational life. I mean, we're back to the in the world part. Yes, we want to be in the world, and we want to be in the world in authentic way as possible. And that means if we're of it, we're not in it in as authentic way as possible. If we're covering up, we're not letting ourselves see the truth, not letting ourselves feel the truth. We all know so many ways that then impacts our relational life. And the in the world part is largely relational life with other humans. So this sense of our inner this truth quotient, let's say, You know, we all have like this inner atmosphere in which we have a relationship to ourself. And so how pure or how open or how authentic is that inner relationship to yourself? That is a felt thing. It's not an idea, right? It's a felt thing. You actually sense that inner atmosphere. And as we're working, of course, to develop presence, develop authenticity, this whole question around how truthful are we, how much do we bend the truth, you know, become really super important. So I had thought of an exercise for you to do to explore this personally. As you know, these webinars we're doing are for two things, more than two, but to represent how an actual meeting goes in our schools so people get a taste of that. So there's a talk, there's an exercise, there's then a question period, which we'll get to. But also content. So that was actually teaching something important. And I think this particular question around truth and lying and our own personal inner sense of atmosphere, our relation to ourselves in terms of truth, is so central. So it's not just a little introductory thing. So exercise we'll do in groups of 3, and I'll tell you what the question is, and then Greg's going to come on and tell you a little bit about how we'll do it in terms of getting into those groups of 3. This software actually will automatically put you in groups of 3. It's really cool. So what I want us to do is a monologue format, and I want you to just choose a situation that might be you're dealing with now or you're dealing with recently, something that comes to your mind. I'm sure that already thing coming to your mind as I'm talking about this. And you want to explore that situation from this view of truth, untruth. Ways in which you may not be aligned with the truth of that situation, right? So you want to look at the situation with fresh eyes, right? Maybe another way to say this is you look at it from the perspective of holding your own inner sense of truth compass or sensitivity to where there isn't truth. Right? And you want to explore this particular situation with those eyes. You look at it in that way, right? And see, you know, talk about that situation, feel that situation, but as you're doing it, you're staying in touch with this inner atmosphere, right? And then you want to see if you can explore why you have gone along with the particular untruth that you're finding, right? You're going to try to see, okay, what is this situation, you know, hasn't been easy. Is there some kind of untruth in it that I hold? I've been a part of this thing not working out, right? That's the first thing. You want to actually see that, feel it. And then, you know, if you do that, you can see how come you might have stuck to that particular untruth. It might be, you know, you find, I just really uncomfortable with being truthful. Or I just really, it might be hard for me to tell my friend X, Y, or Z, right? And then that'll mean you're seeing some kind of collusion in this worldwide web of self-deception where you think that talking, you know, talking truthfully doesn't work. Or maybe, you know, you're afraid of this particular emotion or that one, so on, whatever it is, see? But we want to apply this inner sense of truthfulness to a real life situation you have, okay? So each person will take 15 minutes to talk about that. You do a monologue and you're just exploring. The monologue isn't so much to educate those two people who are sitting with you about you. It's more for you to explore, for you to find out more the truth of the situation, see? And so each person takes 15 minutes. It's a monologue. The other people are just sitting, not asking questions, not giving feedback, trying not to influence you. So you're basically a silent presence, being there, listening, paying attention, supporting that monologue, that exploration. Okay, so each person does that, goes from one person, the next person, the next person, and you time it. Somebody who's not talking keeps the time, and then gently you tell the person, okay, time's up. You take a, whatever, little to finish their sentence, whatever. And then the next person, and then the next person. And then after all three have done their exploration, I'm going to take another 15 minutes to, first of all, just feel what's happening amongst you. Again, we're wanting to use that inner sense, that inner atmosphere, as I called it. And there'll be an atmosphere in the field of the three of you too. You'll recognize that, and you want to see, okay, what's that? And then have a conversation about what you feel about the situation. What do you feel in that field of the three of you? And then that'll be an hour, and we'll come back and talk about it. Okay, so I think that's probably pretty clear. Let's let Greg say a couple things about how we do the breakout space, and then we'll start that. And some of you might have a question or so. So, Greg?
Yeah,